Hi everybody, I'm back again and here with another attempt. I'm sorry I'm so late. I just am late today. That is how this is rolling. But I wanted to make sure that I am showing up and trying to get into a pattern of being, as it were. So this is why I'm like, okay, you know what, late is better than never. Better than not happening at all. So unless something really severe happens, like I'm deathly ill or something like that, then or else if it's not in the schedule, like I said, later on this month I'm going to be out of town. I'm not going to be reading while I'm out of town. But that is for the week after next. No, next week. Yeah, next week, Thursday, Friday. I won't be streaming, and then, well, I'll probably only stream like on the Monday and Tuesday, and then I'll stream again. I'll be back again the Wednesday, which means 18th, 19th I'll stream, and then I'm back again on the 27th. So my pseudo schedule until I get a real schedule going. But that's not what you're here for. You're not here for me to talk to you about schedules. You're here for me to go with chapter 3 of the story. And I think what I'd like to also do for future things is to kind of go over a quick recap of what happened the other day. Maybe. I don't know if we need one because it's just daily, so you can go back to past broadcasts. Because it's Monday, you'd have to go back to the Friday broadcast, but that's all good. So I'm currently reading the Guardian of the Sword manuscript, and this is an alternate manuscript that was written in 1982, which is 5 years after the other manuscript that was finished in 1977. So there's going to be some differences. I'm going to be contrasting and comparing and seeing how I feel about it. And there we go. Chapter 3. Then wise Yakar said, "We will go from these plains to the hills in the north. There we shall hold a land safe from the bowmen in the iron coats, and be far from the war which they pursue against the little ones and the other people." And there gathered to him 500 men and women, with children as well, both of the hunter people and of the farmers whose forefathers had fled the old island on the night of fire. All these were united in an attempt to survive the war which was raging in the land. To this end, they marched far into the hills and established a village. On the second night, in their new place, they beheld in the sky the flare of the dread magic called the Little Sun, which the dwarves and the other people had loosed beyond the mountains. Yakar knew it alone for what it was. "Here we will dwell," he declared, "and so far as we are able, we will hold these lands in peace. But let no one doubt that we will hold them." The hill people's history. Randall Eagleclaw. 3 days after his battle with the troll, Rorik crouched in the shelter of a bush at the crest of a hill overlooking a village of considerable size. What he knew of the hills was from hearsay, but he guessed that this should be Carol Dawn, one of the chief villages of the Icarians, reputed to have remained true to their traditional friendship with the folks of the plains. After watching for some time, he had still seen no one who looked other than Icarian. It was likely, though, that after 5 years in the hills, the Asbalanians would have taken on Icarian dress, at least somewhat. And if you're going to ask for word of the prince, Carol Dawn was the best place to begin, though nothing could be taken for granted now. with the Icarians selling themselves to the barbarians. Indeed, with the fall of Aventir, Asbeln's last fortress, the Icarians might well have accepted the sovereignty of the Hygerians, and he would be walking to doom by walking into the village. With a grin for all these speculations, Rorik said, "Delay but weakens warrior hands, binds the heart with iron hands. Are they friends or are they foe? Wishing will not make it so." Standing, he hooked his thumb in the front of his belt and strolled down toward the village. Noises of mild alarm went up almost immediately, and a cluster of armed men gathered to meet him before he had reached the edge of the village. They showed no hostility, only watchful caution, and he said, "I seek Prince Connell of Asbeln. Can anyone direct me to him?" There were mutterings among them in their own language, which was the tongue of the Durakos of the swamp, mixed with a few Asbalanian words in changed pronunciation. One of them moved quickly among the huts. Several others, arrows knocked, went up to the brush where Rorik had been hidden, surveying the area carefully. The rest stayed to watch him, and more began to gather. They dressed mostly in skins, though some wore wool and linen, which had come in trade from the lowlands. The men wore kilts, and some wore jackets as well, and many of them decked their hair with feathers in the manner of the Durakos. The women wore knee-length skirts of leather or cloth. The men gathered round Rorik carried a variety of weapons, most of them carrying bows and arrows, and a few armed with spears, swords, and axes as well. A man of the middle age, with graying hair, pushed through the circle. He was stocky and powerful, and a necklace of amber beads hung on his bare chest. He looked at Rorik up and down. "I am the chief of this village. My name is Orn. Who are you?" "I am Rorik of Aventir." "There is word that Aventir has fallen." "Aventir is fallen, but I have brought the sword hither to Connell, and I have news for him as well." "Would you know the prince if you saw him?" "Unless the years since Drix has changed him beyond all likelihood, I am sure he'll be interested in the news." "And what might that news be, save for the falling of the last of Asbeln's fortresses, and the fact that his land lies helpless at the mercy of the Hygerians?" "With respect, chief, that news must be told first to the prince." "You do well to be cautious, for the prince has enemies, but none in this village, and I must use caution as to who is brought before him. The Hygerians would pay well for his death, or even for certain knowledge of his whereabouts." But now another young man appeared, tall and blond as Rorik himself, but more slender. Even without the red dragon on his jacket, Rorik recognized him. "My lord prince, I have found you. Is it well with you?" "Well, hiding here in the hills while enemies roam unhindered through my lands. While Aventir stood, we still had some hope. And what hope is there now?" His expression changed, and he grinned a ruthful grin. "My apologies, guardian. The loss of Aventir will be no less bitter to you than to me." No apology was needed, my lord, but all is not yet lost." "Indeed not, for I see you've brought away the sword. I was a very small boy when it was brought to the city of Corel in order that Gunval Eaglesword might attempt to draw it. Yet for all his strength and skill at arms, the sword would not come an inch from the scabbard." He mused on that for a moment. "Gunval died, they say, trying to bring the body of my father from Drix Field." "My lord, I bring you more than the sword. Since you recognize it, you can bear witness to this." Rorik drew it from its scabbard, and heard the gasps of surprise from the assembled Icarians as it glowed in his hand. The face of the prince was alight with joy. So the sword is unsheathed at last? And will that not be worth another 100 men? The practical war commander's portion of Rorik's mind urged him to ask, "How many men do you have here, my lord?" "Fewer and fewer. 500 may come away from Drixfield. 500 came away from Drixfield. Some of those felt that all was lost and returned to their homes to live as best they could. 200 went with the barons, Okar and Nedrun, to raise a rebellion across the mountains. 5 returned with the word that the barons both died when they met more Hygerians than they expected. We lost more as time went on, and less of the land remained free. A few others came in, but we lost many when the Hygerians put out word that all old barons who would come forward might have their old lands in peace. Lukar and Indabar left, persuading Brigga to go with them, leaving with only a few freeholders to serve as commanders for the 200 men left to me. But you'll know what peace Razak gave them. There was a great feast, with the barons themselves at the high table. When the host stepped down to speak to a messenger of the king, which was a signal for the guards to cast their javelins into those at the table. Few will ever trust the word of Razak again. To the best of my knowledge, you are the last of the old barons left, and the fall of Aventir took the heart out of many of our men. I have 200 men, with little prospect of getting more, and 200 are only enough to annoy the Hygerians into putting an end to us altogether, perhaps to repay him the hospitality of the hill folk by bringing the Dark Ones in to destroy them. We can make a start with 200, and if we can recruit a few Hygerians, I believe we can perform deeds which will attract more men to our banner. The prince raised an eyebrow. "Aye? You are perhaps possessor of the secrets of the elder heroes, and can summon the trees of the forest to do your bidding, as did Chael, son of Tarek?" They were walking now to a low hut where the prince was quartered. "Not quite so easily, my lord," Rorik answered. "We shall depend on the strength and skill of mortal men. Will any of the Icarians join us?" "Aye, some will. Some of the far-sighted ones will consider the likelihood of the Hygerians invading the hills when they have done with the lowlands, and others will seek to wipe out the shame they feel that some of their countrymen should do so soon forsake the ancient bond between our races, while still others will come for the adventure of it. In the time it would take for me to raise my voice and ask, we could have 50, and in 7 weeks we might have 500. Think of this, then, my lord. We cannot defeat a large force of Hygerians with much less than equal numbers. However, if we send out fast parties to raid, to destroy scouts and foraging parties, we can cut them down little by little without allowing them to bring the full weight of their numbers to bear. And if we field a small force of mounted bowmen, we might strike and run before their garrisons can fight back. We could challenge their control of the lowlands beneath us, and recruit more men on the strength of our early success, until we are able to meet them in open battle. And where will we get these horses? We will get what we can from their lowland herdsmen at first, and take them from the Hygerians later. You have thought of everything, then? The journey between here and Aventir was long, my lord prince, and there is little else to occupy my mind. A swift smile lighted the prince's features. Formalities and titles are for others. To you I am Connell, and you shall be Rorik, and let the enemies of Asvalon beware. Would that my father had had counselors of your sort. When would you begin? Connell's enthusiasm swept Rorik as well. Tonight, if possible. Aye, we might raise a small party for tonight. You'll come show the sword, and I shall I shall come to show myself. Victory to Asbeln! Victory to Asbeln with Conall, Rorik answered, and the two young men clasped hands and looking into each other's eyes. They found among the Icarian volunteers 20 who could ride and set out for the lowlands. Traveling by night and lying up by day, they acquired 20 horses in 3 days. On the third day, as they camped in a grove of trees eating cold rations, a Hygerian patrol passed by. They watched in silence. When the dark-clad horsemen were out of sight, Rorik turned to Conall. "We shall not ride thus for long. We will not be able to. Do you remember what the farmer said? The one who gave us the last 4 horses? I do for you what I can, but should the Hygerians prove themselves to be masters of the land, then I must submit to their will. I am not a man to die for a lost cause when my family needs me." Rorik smiled. "As they say, in the victory of your friends are an army. In defeat, only the dead rally to you. We have 2 weeks, perhaps 3, in which we may gather horses thus. After that, they will be asking if we intend to fight, or only to lurk in the hills." Almost from the very moment of their return to Carol Dawn, they met Icarians practicing at horseback archery. To begin, they shot from a standing mount, then began to work with the horses walking. Even for expert bowmen, which most were, it was no easy feat. Perseverance brought eventual skill. Some, the very best, grew able to hit a man-sized target at 30 paces, galloping. Most, however, found it better to stop the horse before shooting. About mid-morning of that day, a hunter came running into the report that a small band of Asbelnians in armor were making their way toward the town. He also reported that their shields bore the device of the upraised sword, so the Guardian came out expectantly. They were 10 in number, and their leader was a short, stout, grizzled man, whose quick movements belied his girth. When they saw Rorik, they stopped, fell into 2 lines, drew well used and brought them clashing across their shields in a salute. How about I do this again? Fell into 2 lines, drew a well-used sword and brought them clashing across. Drew well-used swords and brought them clashing against their shields in a salute. A moment later, they were all crowding around him, asking the same question. It was their leader, Baran, who brought them gruffly into order at last, and Rorik was able to answer the question. "Yes, I fell from Aventur's wall at the end of the fight, but was fortunate enough to land in water. I made my way through the swamp to the hills and discovered on the way that the sword is mine to wield. And now, Baron, son of Ralph, tell us your tale." "When we saw you fall, I inquired quickly of those with me as to whether they were willing to cut their way out, perhaps rally to the prince. 23 of us fought our way to the small pot. 17 were come through it. Was confusion in the Hyger by then, so we were easily able to make our way to the forest. Since they all seemed to be striving to make their way into Aventur for the plunder, we were only when we finally got beyond their. From that time until this, we have striven to find our way to the prince, to give him what aid we could. To the powers be thanks for my Lord Guardian. And I thank the powers for your wits, Baran the Swift. We have the beginnings of an army here, and will need all your experience." Who remained with the prince were the dedicated core of those who had come with him and had not yet been driven by the despair and disillusionment. The arrival of the sword stopped further discussions, but all realized that this was merely, and that only real action would cause real morale. Light, began to explain to his new ideas to the men who were to train in convincing them by his sheer presence that these new notions would. Okay, so had this been other manuscripts that I can actually write on, I would have been scrolling through this and then I would comment about this. At this point, I can, yeah, this is chapter 3. It seems a little more focused. So I kind of like it a little bit than the other one, which is more purple prosy. But I already published the other one, so this is kind of funny because there's like odd mistakes here. I'm stumbling over some of the words. So I can't, yeah, so it's interesting. I just like the idea of an alternate manuscript, which kind of makes it, what can I say? Yeah. What do I order fun on this chapter? I just, it's together, so I'm pretty quick. But I like I said, I think I'd want to read the old manuscript on this from there. In order to do kind of a real, but I want to scan first, which is why, because I'm reading and then scanning pages in carefully. So thank you again, and I'll see you again later. Have a good night.